Ansel Elgort arrived at the screen with a mix of boy next door relatability and a performance precision that made viewers and critics take notice almost immediately. What made that run so compelling wasn't just that he booked one recognizable project after another, it was that each choice seemed to reveal a different facet of his talent and hinted at a versatility that could sustain a long, genuinely interesting career. Then came the pivot that proved he could carry more than just teen comfort dramas. In action leaning and genre pieces, he displayed an actor's willingness to put himself on the line. He had a physicality and a rhythm that made high concept films feel grounded, and what many found arresting was how he blended physical performance with a keen sense of timing with both comedic and dramatic, so scenes that required movement and quick reaction or a sustained emotional beat came off as effortless. Directors noticed that combination. He wasn't just a pretty face, and he wasn't just charisma on toast, he had craft. Beyond individual credits, what made Elgor's run feel special at the time was the coherence of his public persona. It wasn't being marketed as a manufactured product, he seems like an artist exploring intersecting passions. He flirted with music in his off hours, DJ'd, and released tracks, and approached roles with a musician's ear for rhythm, choices that differentiated him from contemporaries who felt boxed into a single lane. That multidimensionality suggested he could expand his brand organically into music, fashion, or other performance-based ventures without feeling like he was chasing clout. There was a sense that he could evolve, experiment, and surprise. There was an undeniable aesthetic magnetism to his performances. On screen he had an everyman warmth, but off screen he cultivated an edge, a taste for music, for nightlife, or projects that felt slightly left of center. That combination fed into a fanbase that felt both protective and proud. He seemed to have the ingredients to be more than a momentarily idol. Presence, curiosity, and a work ethic that suggested serious ambition rather than celebrity chasing. And what's easy to forget now is how quickly that period built momentum. Each role seemed to amplify the last, creating a forward pull that felt unstoppable. Industry conversations about him weren't speculative. In the abstract, they were tactical. And what filmmakers would he collaborate with next? Which genres might he reinvent? Or how his music and acting could interact in future projects? For a time, his run read like the opening chapters of a long career, rather than the peak promise that promised more. Both The Fault in Our Stars and Baby Driver were landmark moments that pretty much erased Elgort's career, each in different but complementary ways. The Fault in Our Stars put him in the front of a massive, emotionally invested teen and young adult audience. As August Waters, he wasn't just a handsome romantic lead, he anchored a tearful and character-driven drama adapted from a best-selling novel, proving he could carry heavy emotional beats and win the trust of viewers who cared deeply about the story. The film's box office reach and cultural footprint turned him from a familiar face into a household name overnight, giving him mainstream visibility and a devoted fanbase that followed his next moves. After the oxygen of the early rise had filled the room, the conversation around Ansel Elgort shifted dramatically, and almost overnight the narrative that he had been building around a promising young star turned dark and complicated. In June 2020, a woman using the name of Gabby went public on social media and accused Elgort of sexually assaulting her in 2014 when she said she was 17 and he was 20. The allegation and the screenshots and the additional posts that surfaced around it immediately became a major story, and Elgort responded publicly with a denial. He said the relationship had been brief, legal, and entirely consensual, while expressing regrets of how he handled the breakup. Once the allegation was out, other items circulated that widened the scope of public concern. Posts from other women alleging inappropriate relationships with direct messages when they were young, screenshots that were shared online, and persistent coverage that kept the story in the headlines. The result wasn't a single news cycle but a continuing conversation, and major outlets assembled timelines and reran the story as a new angles appeared, so the allegations never fully disappeared from the public eye. That sustained attention is part of why the episode left such an outside mark on him. It wasn't only the original claim, but the drip of additional reputationally damaging material that followed. Industry and the press responded in ways that made plain of how fragile momentum can be for a young star. In the run-up to the release of Spielberg's West Side Story, the controversy, complicated publicity, castmates were repeatedly asked to address the allegations at press events. Studios and publicists tried to steer conversations away from the accusation, and Elgort largely retreated from social media and high visibility promotion. That awkwardness had two effects at once. It made the press tour and messaging around a big film harder, and it made Elgort himself a less bankable, more controversial presence for future casting and brand partners. Over the months that followed, the practical career consequences became visible. He disappeared from social feeds for long stretches, public appearances grew infrequent, and the steady pipeline of high profile new announcements that had marked his early career years went quiet. Entertainment outlets noted that aside from projects already completed or well into production, there were a few new major attachments publicly announced for him, a sign that studios and producers were understandably cautious about bringing a much scrutinized actor into a headline roles. In short, the buzz that had propelled him into spotlight roles cooled, and doors that had been opening began to close, or at least to stay shut. Beyond the concrete career markers, the broader reputational damage was severe and swift. Stardom depends heavily on trust. The trust of audiences, colleagues, and industry gatekeepers, and public allegations of sexual misconduct erode that trust in a way that's often hard to repair. For many viewers and decision makers, the specific details matter less than the larger pattern. Serious accusations generated risk for projects that don't want controversy tied to their leads, whether or not legal charges followed. And to be clear, coverage centers on allegations and denial rather than the criminal convictions. The practical outcome was similar: lost momentum and fractured public goodwill, and a career that no longer looked like it did in 2016 and 2017. The arc from rising star to embattled figure is a reminder of how public careers hinge on reputation. And Elgort's early run showed a performer who could cross genre lines and build cultural capital. The subsequent allegation reoriented and conversation around him, and whether justly or not, made many industry players and audiences to think twicely about what it would mean to put him in center stage again. The follow wasn't a single dramatic cancellation so much as a slow narrowing of opportunities and a long, visible shadow over work that remained. And in the business of movies and music, that kind of reputational harm can be as career altering as anything else.